Well, I think truth is like a cat. You know, a dog will come up beside you and wait for you to pet it. A dog, you could lock it in a closet for 3 days, come back and it'll wag its tail and still love you. A dog will wait patiently beside you. Joey, how you doing, man? You got on there faster than I can make a comment. Good to see you, buddy. A dog will wait patiently for you. It will love you no matter what. And if you ignore it, it'll still love you. But truth is not like that. Truth is like a cat. A cat will get in your face when you least suspect it and insist upon getting attention. If you don't give it attention, it will become angry and bitter and will eventually leave. That is how truth works. Truth does not wait patiently by your side. It sneaks up on you when you least suspect it. It smacks you in the back of the head and says, pay attention to me. And if you don't, I'm out of here. And that's how truth works. It's not going to just come when you're looking for it necessarily. It's going to expect you to be ready when it comes to you. And that I think has eluded a lot of people's ability to understand truth. They think that truth only comes by the way that they intend for it to come to them. And so when it does come to them in an unexpected fashion or from an angle that they don't know that it's going to come from, they're unable to accept it. Now, I am going to talk about, this is part 3. If I have to do this for 2 hours, I will get to a conclusion on this. After all, the first two episodes, which I highly recommend if you haven't seen yet, that you go back and watch the first 2. I am going to tell you why I believe that Hyles Anderson College is an extension of a pedo gang network, or at least was when it was founded. Probably still is. And I have to tell you that the evidence is circumstantial. Everyone is innocent until proven guilty. No one should be assumed guilty. No one should be assaulted. No one should be interrogated, irritated, aggravated, annoyed, stalked, whatever. Do not bother these people because of what I say. Okay? There's no way to prove what I say without genealogical research and that sort of thing, which I don't have the money to do. So let's talk about where we left off. And yesterday I did talk more about Hyles Anderson College and my experiences there and how it developed within me a bad understanding of women. I was talking about the offenses they would give you as a punishment, and then how it literally slowed me down. It probably took me at least an extra year to graduate, even though I'd been there for heaven since 97. It took me till 2003 or 4. I forgot now. I think it was 2004 till I finally graduated. One whole year of it was just because of just having to spend so much time working off offenses. If you left your drawer open slightly, just this much or something like that, they'd give you offenses, and they would give them to you so thoroughly every single day, no matter how well you did. You had a wrinkle on your bed, they just find something to give you offenses. And for every 10 offenses, you had to work an hour for the college, so they made sure that they kept you very busy and working for them. It got so bad that I literally had to not schedule classes to schedule time, usually at least a couple hours a day, just to work off offenses. One time in the summer, I had worked off offenses on a very, very hot day. And it just so happened that the next day, my mom and stepdad came to visit me. And I got to loosen my belt a notch here. I'm too fat, ate too much. All right, now, they had come to visit me the next day after I'd worked very hard on offenses. And this was the punishment that they gave me, for, a wrinkled bed or whatever. That I had to pick up wood from a stack, move it across the other side of the yard, and then just go back and just take the pile up and just go back and forth and just keep doing that. Move the pile of wood from one side of the yard to the other. That was the punishment. That's how they teach you to make sure your bed's not wrinkled and don't leave your door slightly open, or be a minute late for something, or whatever. There's so many things you couldn't possibly win. A little bit of dust on the dresser, or just whatever. It's amazing how much attention they gave to that dresser, and it didn't matter how good you were or whatever. They just kept giving them to you no matter what. So anyway, I had worked moving this wood pile back and forth on a very hot day, and the next day my mom and stepdad came to visit me at the college, and while I was at church, I literally just passed out. I just fell down and collapsed and couldn't get up, and I didn't even know why. Apparently, I dehydrated. They dragged me out to the hospital and got some IVs going, and finally returned to normal. Now, that's an odd environment, wouldn't you say? There's something strange about that. And you folks listening today, if you want to ask me questions as I get through this and towards the end, I'll let you know when I'm getting towards the end. Feel free to ask questions, especially if you've been through 3 whole episodes here with me. I'm sure the things have come up in your mind that you're thinking, I'd really like to ask him that, and that's fine. I'd be happy to answer those questions for you. And what I found was so many of the people there that had graduated and gone to start their own churches and so forth had a lot of problems. Friends of mine, so many of the people there broke up their church, split their church, hurt a lot of people because they became deviants of various promiscuity issues. From doing things with children to running off with other wives and secretaries. And it wasn't just a few. I mean, you always expect a bad apple out there, but I would say probably a majority of the ones that went out and started their churches ended up having serious issues. And that begs the question, well, why is there so much of this going on at this college and from graduates of the college? How did they get this issue for how they treated women and how they thought that women should be in the home and that sort of thing? And I had adopted that part of the understanding myself. I had no view of women, I don't think, before I went to college. I didn't think much about it. So when I got to college, I had adopted a lot of their viewpoints because I hadn't been taught anything before that, really. So I truly believed, and I do say truly believed, that it was a woman's job to push me into further doing more ministry work, to push me towards spending as much time as possible doing that kind of work. And I was greatly shocked when I got married that my wife thought it was important to do things on a relationship basis, to actually have love in your marriage. And honestly, as an INTJ, I was very dry and very logical. I had a list of logical reasons that, or not reasons, but logical things that I thought a wife should be like before I got married. So if I dated a woman, I would go back and write down how many off this list. Very INTJ thing to do. Very you'll notice that INTJs make a lot of lists, and we do. I am the kind of person that could tell you something that happened just about every century for the last 5,000 or 6,000 years, because when I get bored, I just write it out. This is kind of that's kind of weird stuff that we INTJs do. So we take that plus Hyles Anderson ideology, and it's not pretty. So I was very mean to my wife, not because I wanted to be mean or anything, but just because I had no understanding that women actually enjoyed being with you, that part of a relationship, in the way that, do I have a picture? Oh, PC or laptop? Oh, this is a laptop, Stephen. This is a laptop. So my understanding had to change, and I was very depressed over it, unbelievably depressed, thinking that I would now have to figure out how to have a relationship with my wife. And I didn't. I just shut down for like 10 years and was just mean and kind of cruel. I mean, not abusive, not, never hit anybody or anything like that. That'd be horrible. But hey, Earl, good to have somebody across the pond. I'm talking about the college I went to and how I think it was a Christian college and how I think that is an extension of a pedo gang. This is part 3, Earl. And I definitely encourage you to go back and listen to parts 1 and 2 because I did a lot of exposing on this group. It doesn't hurt to go through the internet a little bit. Hey, Rebecca, go through the internet and Google some of the things that I've been talking about and get a better understanding, because for me, it was a blur. They kept you so busy, so incredibly busy, going to college full-time, working full-time. And I didn't just work full-time. I usually worked 50, 60 hours, very hard factory job that they helped me get. And doing ministries from 6 a.m. to 10:30 on Saturdays. You're supposed to be in Chicago or wherever your ministry was, visiting, and you were expected to do these things, or you were browbeat or looked upon poorly. It wasn't necessarily a rule. You only had to go out by the rules for a couple hours, but the people would make fun of you and that sort of thing if you didn't. And it was just a very bad attitude of the way people operated and thought up there. And then they didn't seem to have much concern or care, by and large, for the people they were supposed to be helping. Oh, yeah, Earl. Oh, yeah, well, that was something, that Grenfell Tower. That was obviously a contrived event by the numbers. There's no question about that. You might want to go back and look up the Grenfell video if you haven't seen it, some of you. Earl's from that part of the world there. He lives in Germany now, but that was in England. I think you lived in England at one time, didn't you, Earl? I believe so. But now... so where was I? I get distracted so easy. Now, so how did I get to the conclusion this was a pedo gang? Well, first we had the problem with Dave Hyles down at Pinellas Park Baptist Temple that I discussed in the last video. For one, he had been moved from church to church, and his kid, Jack David Hyles, I think he was murdered. That's my opinion. I can't prove it. Okay. But there is some information on the internet that appears that he had broken bones before in unusual ways. And another child of his died, I believe, at another time. Yes. British. Yep. Uh-huh. Okay. So Earl is originally British. So yeah, good to know. I have been to the airport in Britain, but I did go to France there when I was 18. That was a great experience, by the way, and maybe a story for another time. But I have visited 2 foreign countries, France and the Philippines. Oh, no kidding. So your parents are from Jamaica. You grew up in England, and now you're in Germany. World traveler, man. World traveler. Well, I better stay with my point here, or I'm going to get down so many rabbit trails. But so Dave Hyles, the son of Jack Hyles, had apparently murdered his child, and that happened while I was there. It was, now at the time I had no idea. I didn't connect the clues, but also the people that I had met that had any connection to Hyles Anderson College, including a pastor that had visited the college I was going to, Clearwater Christian College. I went to his church for a while. He was unbelievably rude and angry and mean and called names and just horrible person. And then I found out his life was a mess as well. And that was my first experience with Hyles Anderson College. And then I ran into that experience with Dave Hyles, the son of Jack Hyles. Dave Hyles had originally been planned to be the pastor at First Baptist Church of Hammond, Indiana. But when he was too promiscuous, there's the word, up there in Hyles Anderson, he was moved from churches to churches to churches. Everywhere he went, he kept starting all kinds of illicit activity and that sort of thing with others in the churches. So it was very unfortunate that kept happening, but I did not put the pieces together. And Evelyn, this might be PG-13 rated. I might encourage you, dear, to maybe tune out on this one, okay? You can watch me on another video. This probably isn't the best one for you, darling. We're going to talk about some things that probably are above your age level, okay? So just wanted you to know that. So you might want to go ahead and tune out for this one. Now, that's my niece. Good little girl, but she doesn't need to hear some of the things we're going to talk about on here. So, and I don't mean little. I know you're a teenager. But anyway, so we had Dave Hyles and the things that he did, and horrible pastor that I met down there. And this is all before I even went to Hyles Anderson College. I had not yet connected the dots. And then there was the issue of the guy that I took with me to Hyles Anderson College. We both decided to go there at the same time, and he had a 360 in personality, as if he had a split personality, and turned very violent and angry. Complete opposite of what I had known in Florida. Very, very strange, very odd personality. Now, all this happened in a fairly short time. You'd think I would have started connecting the dots, but all I did was just dismiss it and say I was there to learn on my own and to become what I was supposed to be. And originally that was as a history teacher, and later on, which also slowed down my graduation. Why it took me so long partially is because I changed my major when I let them talk me into doing preaching. So I lost a lot of my work that I'd done. So I'd already changed colleges, then I changed majors, and then I got married, and then I had a kid, and then they started giving me so many offenses before I got married that I had to spend time working, just carrying wood back and forth, to the point that I literally passed out. And the amount of work that I did was unbelievable. The last semester that I was there, I decided to work for the ministry, and I drove a bus for their private school. Not only did they have a college, but they also had a private school. So on Saturday, we would raise the money for the kids to go, and also I would help with some of the kids. I'd pay out of my own pocket as much as I could afford on top of my college tuition to help them go, because Chicago was a horrible place, and anybody that could get to another school that had any desire for their kids to live better, they would try. And these kids were unbelievable. They would work really hard, pay their own way selling candy. And I'm talking, they'd have to raise $350 a month every month of school year to be able to go to this school. And they did it. And we helped them. And a lot of times just selling tons of candy door to door. And if you think about how much money that is over time, that's a lot of candy. Well, I would drive the bus for them, and the first kid I picked up was at 4:50 a.m. throughout the school year. That's how early they would get up and help pay their own way, most of them. A few of them their parents paid or whatever. But most of them were broke and, from the ghetto and that sort of thing. So we had to do everything we could to help them. But so that's what my schedule looked like. I would literally get up at about 2:30 a.m., have the bus ready by 3, drive all the way across Chicago so that I'd have the first kid. And I ended up driving 260 miles per day on that bus route, picking up the kids, dropping them off, and taking them home. I counted one day that I was passing 32 railroad tracks per day, having to open and close your bus door and come to a complete stop. It's really, really something else on that route. And while I was still going to college and still, on Sunday driving the bus for the church. So I would literally get about 4 hours sleep per night. And I mean, I would have to go straight to bed, set the alarm, and jump up and not dare touch that snooze, because if you did, you'd miss a day. So that's the kind of schedule that I did. And it wasn't much easier the previous years that I was there. I really busted my tail. But the further I got into it, and when I finally won that last trip to the Philippines, and by bringing the most visitors to the church, I got really, really depressed after going on that trip to the Philippines. Even though I liked the trip, I saw something that I had never considered before about how my relationship issues were all messed up. And fortunately, I'm so glad that my wife was not of the understanding of the other females of Hyles Anderson College, or I don't know that it would have ended up the way that it finally did, to where we're friends now today. Uh, Probably it would have come to a feverish pitch like so many of the others. And I did get down to a deep, dark depression and do things that I shouldn't have done and that sort of thing, only recently to come out of it. So it's like over 10 years of just being seriously depressed. It was a horrible experience. But I am glad that, with counseling and also taking some meds and things, that because I'd worn down my body so bad, the way that I had worked so hard while I was in college, doing things that most people just wouldn't do, 4, 5, 6 hours of sleep for like 6, 7 years, just unreal the way that they work you. So it was mostly a blur. You don't learn much in the classes. And then you start noticing that all the other people have the relationship issues as well. And they don't learn a proper understanding of how to treat ladies. And they don't treat them well, and they end up breaking up churches and hurting a lot of people, just like Dave Hyles was going around the country doing, starting illicit activities with group members in the church. Sometimes because I'm not sure who's listening, I'm not going to say what those activities were, but if you go to the worst thoughts in your mind, those were the sorts of activities that were going on with Dave Hyles and many others. Some of them who preached in my classes. Now, Jack Scott, who became pastor after Jack Hyles died, at first seemed like a great person. He had taught my preaching class in the college while he was the vice president of the college, when he would actually show up. And turned out that he had taken a teenager across lines for illicit activities, and is now serving a 14-year prison sentence. So just like Dave Hyles, and there's so many things about Dave Hyles. One of his sisters did a TED Talk, TED Talk, talking about how her dad and her brother were in this cult, and how his wife, former wife, had come out saying that how he had kissed every girl in the church, and yet when he got married to her, Jack Hyles had said that, this is the first time that they've ever kissed, and like all the girls chuckled because like he'd kissed like every girl in the church, and everybody knew it was a lie, but he's a bald-faced lie, saying that, and he was very much aware of it, because he used to ask questions about them kissing to them, and they all answered honestly. So he knew full and well what he was saying was a lie. And then there was the affairs with the secretaries that Jack Hyles was part of. And so then I start to look into recently, and because it was a blur while I was there, we didn't have internet access. No one had spoken a single time to me about how Jack Hyles had had affairs with the secretary or anything. I was completely ignorant of all this until after I'd gone to college. For years after I'd gone to that college, after I'd graduated, I didn't know any of this had happened, except for what I knew about Dave Hyles because of my experiences with him in Florida. But as far as what Jack Hyles had done previously, before I'd even gone to that college, I didn't know. And it started dawning on me when Jack Scott, the pastor who took over after Jack Hyles, had been arrested, that wow, some of the suspicions I had, I should really start looking into. And that's when I started, and the internet was a new thing to me. So I'd never used internet at all while I was in college. We weren't even allowed to. So we weren't allowed to use internet or listen to music or anything like that. They were very, very strict on their music. Haircut like I have right now, because it touches my ears, I would have got demerits for that, or offenses or something, had to go work an hour, and I would have had to go cut my hair. No joke. You see how short it is, but that's, that was the kind of atmosphere that they had, and the rules that they had. Well, anyway, so after Jack Scott got arrested, I started looking into it more and more and more. And it was interesting that some of the things that I discovered, I'm looking at my notes here a little bit, about Dave Hyles, was that one of the women that he had been with, who had a tattoo of him on her thigh was named Joyce Phaneuf, Phaneuf, who was a hooker from Detroit. And I thought, Detroit, well, that's an interesting connection. So one of the many people that he had been with was a known hooker with an arrest record and all this, named Joyce, and she was from Detroit. Well, isn't that interesting? Because before I had gone to Hyles Anderson College, I visited Metro Baptist Church in Belleville, which is right outside of Detroit, very, very close. And the person who went there was Russell Anderson, the financier millionaire of Hyles Anderson College. He's the one that funded and helped start Hyles Anderson College back in 1972, I think it was. 72 or 76, I can't remember. It was on the sign, and now I forgot. Now, the Andersons, and this is very important, if you've been listening to my stories about Hugh, one of the rapists that took Hugh hostage at 4 years old was named Anderson. And it wasn't just at 4 years old. Hugh was taken by a group of pedophiles who were related to governors of various states and various politicians. And they all went to this public school because back in the 50s and 60s, Detroit was the richest city in the world at the time. It's an armpit. It's the reverse now. It's like literally going from, the richest to one of the poorest third world. You'd think he's in a third world country if you went in Detroit today. Completely the opposite. So it's really hard for people to picture that this was where the rich people took their kids, This is the area where famous people lived and that sort of thing. A lot of movies were made there, and very interesting to even think of Michigan like that, but or especially Detroit. But that's how it was. And Hugh Squires of Squire Guitars, if you've ever seen Squire Guitars, this is the Hugh that talks to me at night. It's the very same Hugh who was kidnapped. One of his teachers back in kindergarten was the actress who played the Wicked Witch of the West on Wizard of Oz. Now, that was in 1939 when she played the Wizard of Oz Wicked Witch, and he was born in 1953, so this would have been roughly 1958 or so. She was literally a practicing witch. Imagine that. The Wicked Witch of the West was literally a practicing witch who would take Hugh and give him to the pedophile gangs, one of whom was named Anderson. Another one was named Wallace. Okay, Wallace, as you know, it was a governor of Alabama. So it's not the governor Wallace who kidnapped him. He doesn't think it was a relative of Wallace. Now, the Wicked Witch of the West would often, I'm just going to call her that, okay, use her real name, is Margaret something. But the Wicked Witch of the West used to tell him that she was related to Governor Wallace, and there was nothing he could do about it, that kind of thing, while she would give him over daily to these pedophiles to be abused. And looking through the credits of The Wizard of Oz, I saw that the Scarecrow, the guy that played the Scarecrow, his middle name was Wallace, because he had kept his, kind of like usually ladies do that, but sometimes keep their maiden name as their middle name. But apparently he had kept Wallace as that name, is what I'm theorizing happened there. So that drew a connection to me that even on Wikipedia, and I promise you, because the CIA watches anything that talks about Hugh, when they get a hold of this knowledge, this will not be on Wikipedia within a week. We've watched them literally change. Before I had a VPN where I could scramble my signal and that sort of thing, they would literally change the internet while we were speaking to each other, because I didn't have one and Hugh did, so they could hear our conversation, and he'd be showing me facts, and they would shut down that site in real time while we're talking. Okay, he had just looked at it, had it up, he'd even screenshotted it, and then neither of us could get on it. That's how fast they try to cover up what happened to him, because the same pedophiles are the same pedophiles that killed John F. Kennedy, and are the same and blamed Oswald for it. All these pedophiles were part of this church where Father O'Donnell, you think of Rosie O'Donnell, okay, a relative, and Father O'Donnell was the priest where Hugh Squires of Squire Guitars, okay, he would confess to that priest. Well, that priest in the Warren Commission was the same priest that blamed and got Lee Harvey Oswald convicted by his testimony in the Warren Commission for shooting John F. Kennedy, which was all a lie. And of course, that's why they had to kill the person who killed Jack Ruby, who killed Lee Harvey Oswald as well. There was no chance this information could get out. So we had Wallace and we had Anderson. And isn't it interesting that I went to, in the Detroit area, a church called Metro Baptist Church just outside of Detroit in Belleville, where Russell Anderson lived and went to church. Is there a circumstantial evidence here that he may be related to the other Andersons? Well, like I said, without a genealogy, I can't prove it. Everybody's innocent until proven guilty. I'm not making an accusation. I am making an observation that he's the right age, lives in the right town, and is connected to a group of a college that is known for having a lot of issues with pedophilia and with rape and with carousing and illicit activity. Now, my dormitory, while I went to Hyles Anderson College, was called Malone Dormitory, and that was after Tom Malone, who has a church in, guess where? The Detroit area, just 9 miles, according to my look on Google Maps there, 9 miles from where Hugh grew up. Isn't that interesting? So we have another connection with a person that Jack Hyles said that he was inspired and used to go preaching with. Another man in the Detroit area. So we have Russell Anderson being the right age. He would have, if he's still alive, he's probably in his upper 80s, I assume. Maybe older than that even. So you'd have been the right age to have been a rapist in that area. And again, I can't tell you, that's not an accusation. It's an observation that he's old enough, okay? I don't know for a fact that he did this, okay? You'll have to do more research, would have to find more information. It is very interesting that when Hugh's uncle had assaulted a police officer and ended up in prison, that the original Anderson who raped him, Charles Anderson, that at least Hugh strongly believes is the original rapist, immediately became the warden of the prison where his uncle was serving time. Isn't that interesting? Because he would visit this this uncle of his in prison, and so Charles Anderson, the original rapist, did not, at least Hugh believes he's the original rapist, could not risk that information getting out. So he had to become the warden. It's a crazy world. It's also interesting to notice that the 82nd Airborne, of which Jack Hyles had been in, I don't think he saw any action in World War II, if memory serves. I think he was just in training during World War II, if memory serves. But he was in the 82nd Airborne. And I've noticed that the 82nd Airborne, still to this day, has issues with human trafficking. There have been arrests just in the last few years with human trafficking events and circles within the 82nd Airborne. Isn't that interesting? Now, I know after World War II, a lot of these, millions of soldiers coming home, and had to, they began, a lot of them, to create the human trafficking networks and the drugs. And they'd also bring back artifacts from overseas from World War II to sell. And black markets developed a lot through the soldiers returning from World War II. Is it very possible and probable that Jack Hyles may have very well been a member of a group of pedophiles in a black market running a drug ring? I do not have direct evidence. I cannot tell you that that is factual. I can tell you that it stands to reason that it is logical. Logical does not mean factual. Okay, it is logical that it could have happened. Okay, that's as best as I can say on that. It's interesting to note that in the testimony of, let's see, it would have been Dave Hyles, Jack Hyles' son, who wrote the recommendation for me to go to Hyles Anderson College on my application. It's interesting that his former wife testified that Jack Hyles had not slept with his wife in 25 years. I think I quoted that directly perfectly in her testimony back in 1989. So, gosh, 89, 79, 69, that would have been all the way back to 68, 67, 65, 64, all the way back to 64. Okay. That's really saying something. Now, he was always putting himself up as the role model of a perfect marriage. And the testimony of both Dave Hyles' former wife and of Jack Hyles' daughter, who did the TED Talk, say that he was a hypocrite at home, that he had bought cars for the secretary every 2 years, had renovated her home and spent all this money, and had basically taken a wife from, even let her live in his house for a while. And so it wasn't a pretty picture of what had gone on. And all this I did not know while I was there at that college. Had no clue. I was there with my whole heart, concerned about trying to help people, trying to learn how to minister to other people, trying to run bus routes. And I really did care about the people when I was there. So all of this, except for Dave Hyles' son in Florida having died while I was down there. And I honestly just accepted the probable lie that it was an accident. I accepted that as truth at the time, and felt bad for them, offered my, my remorse to them and all that. However, previous records indicate that poor boy had been abused in the past, according to online reports, which you can go back and Google for yourself. They're not hard to find. So isn't it interesting that there's so many connections with the Detroit area and Jack Hyles? Tom Malone's church was at 3400 Morgan Road in Orion, 9 miles from Utica, Michigan. When Utica, Michigan is the place where Hugh Squires was raped as a little boy by the Wicked Witch of the West, by the Andersons. The Wicked Witch gave him over to be raped to the pedophile gangs out of school every day. And the Wallaces. All of this, every time, the more that I look into it, the more I discover that there's something to it. Ironically, I was at church today, and I was talking to somebody who mentioned Harris's as a publisher. The Harris family is also related to Hugh's story in a different way. I don't think he was one of the rapists or anything, but he is directly related to the Harris family. So Hugh Squires is directly related. Now, the guy at church was talking about Harris as a publisher, and the Harrises were one of the biggest publishers in the past. And so it was interesting that the more that Hugh says, the more I look into it. And as people say, well, how can Hugh have so many connections to so many famous people? Well, one, he's the descendant of Andrew Jackson, and his uncle, Clarence Rose, was the captain of the USS Enterprise, the not battleship, the aircraft carrier. There we go. So he has a lot of military and presidential connections. His family were the ones that fought the Queen and overthrew, not the Queen, the King, King George III, back in the Revolution, kicked out the King at the time. And the King of England held this grudge, and the throne of England to this day still holds that grudge, still marks the descendants of those that threw them out in this country. They didn't just give up. Okay, they brought in the pedophiles and they knight the sodomites, as you know, like think about Elton John, who stole that name, by the way, and think about Ozzy Osbourne. One of Hughes' rapists was Osbourne, and it is now an Osbourne that runs the sex crimes division of the FBI to this day, and it's all connected. The Queen of England has marked the descendants of the people who overthrew the monarchy in this country, and is very bitter and angry against them, stalks their families to this day, and persecutes them and kills their family members and subjugates them to pedo gangs and brings the pedophilias and knights the rapists and the pedophilias in this and the pedophiles in this country. That is a deliberate act of the throne in England, and it's still going on today. So yeah, all these people were together by design in this same place. The Osbournes that head the FBI sex crimes division to this day, no doubt because they're running a pedophile ring. And if you think the president doesn't know that, yes, he does. Okay, yes, the president of the United States knows and understands about the pedophile rings that his government is operating and covering for. If you don't believe that, then you are unbelievably naive. If you think I was naive by not being able to make these connections when I was young at 18 years old, and I'm giving them to you and you still don't see it, you need to go have a reality check. Okay, you need to go and recheck your naivety, because you're missing a whole lot of the truth of your country, because we have the testimony of someone who was there and saw these people and knows what happened. Okay. And the more you look into it, the more you will find that they're telling the truth. And we copy these things and we make copies and we send them to people because we do know that the CIA will delete them in real time. And after they view even this video, a lot of what I say is going to disappear from the internet. I promise you that, because we've already seen them disappear in real time. So, and that's no joke. That's no exaggeration. What I'm saying is dangerous information, so please share it to as many people as humanly possible. Okay, it's already shared around the world, but it is prohibited in this country, this sort of information, from getting out. Okay, the last person who tried to do Hughes' book was murdered immediately. The guy from Coast to Coast AM, John B. Wells, who interviewed him, was fired the next day from Coast to Coast AM, that radio station that works with ancient aliens. And I'm sure you've seen them and heard of them. If you ever listen to the AM station at night, they talk about UFOs and Bigfoot and witches, all kinds of weird crap like that, all as a deflection from Hughes' story. So yeah, is my college that I went to probably connected to the same pedophilia gangs that raped and did this to a lot of kids in the Detroit area? Yeah, well, it makes a lot of sense for that to be a very real possibility. You have Russell Anderson, who was the right age to have possibly been very closely related to Charles Anderson, the warden, and possibly one of the very rapists. Now, the other names, some of them I don't even want to mention because Hugh says they're very dangerous, and you don't want to sleep with the fishes tonight. So some of the names I probably will not be disclosing to you of some of the rapists. Okay, so I'm telling you, please spread this information that I have given you far and wide, because America needs to wake up of what happened to John F. Kennedy, to the pedophile gangs and where they came from, how they're operating, and what they're doing to us in this country. That we need to wake up, that we need to throw off the pedophile gangs. We need to get the pedophiles out of our government, out of the FBI, that we need to understand that our president is responsible, and not just this president, but the previous presidents as well are responsible, and understand what happened. Now, Hugh was a very brilliant person. And think about it, if you're related to the children of the presidents and that sort of thing, if you're related to the presidents and you have this line of the Harris family that was a very, very wealthy family, publishing company, and before they were a publishing company, they sold every farmer in America a tractor before World War I. So they were inventors. These were brilliant people. And so Hugh grew up a very smart, intelligent person. Had a publishing license at 11 years old, things that you can't normally do as an 11-year-old, and was very, very wealthy by the time he was a teenager. Most people would not even believe how wealthy he was. Had an ASCAP license, I think, at 17, the same sort of ASCAP membership that and when you think of, the cap on the pyramid, that's what the music's referring to. Then you come up with all these Illuminati conspiracies to cover up for the truth of what it really was. It was a musical thing. Okay, it's ASCAP publishers. Okay, they're the top of the pyramid, so to speak. Okay, well, so he had this license and was very, very wealthy and extremely successful all throughout the Detroit area, even though he'd been the victims of pedophile gangs and all this. He was making a lot of money. And no, don't ask him about it. Come on, grow up, guys. Don't ask him about his money. Okay. He's got the receipts. Go through and look at his pictures. I can show you the pictures. He has already got them online. You don't need to ask the questions. Go to his Facebook page, go through his pictures, look through his stuff. It's kind of rude to constantly ask about somebody's money and that sort of thing. Okay. He shows you receipts. He shows you the relevant paperwork and that sort of thing. If you want to know this information, you can know it. Don't be lazy. Go look, go watch his videos, go through all of his information. He puts it out there for anybody to see. Okay. It's not hard for you to learn this information. And if if you really have an honest question, how does this connect to this? He'll tell you, just message him on Facebook or something. Make it an honest question. If you're just trying to argue, don't notify him. Okay, he's had 4 wives killed by these groups of pedophiles related to these gangs. Okay, and he's in no mood to argue. He's out to get justice. Once they started killing his former wives and his fiance, he decided, look, I'm going to expose them. He held the truth for many years, for over 30 years, didn't want to tell anybody. And now he says, screw them. I'm coming after him. Here I come. Okay, now this is the truth of your country, and this is why you know it now. Okay, so it's important that you know and you spread this information. So don't take that lightly. This is big, heavy information. If you don't understand it, get to a point where you understand it, because it's the history of your country and the history of the world. It's the reason we went and carpet bombed 2 million people in the Middle East after 9/11. Innocent people had nothing to do with 9/11. What happened on 9/11 was that the people who killed Kennedy, the people who were the pedophiles that framed Osborne, these same networks of pedophiles and the Queen, they were also stealing Hugh's business. Okay. And Hugh decided to try to fight to get his stuff back, okay, because it was worth hundreds of billions of dollars, and he had a civil rights case in the Pentagon in the very same room where on 9/11 that missile, and I do say a missile, not a plane. Go look at the video. He posts the video. I posted it just a few days ago. It's obviously a missile. You can tell it's not a freaking airplane. Look at that tiny little hole. Okay, look at the fake looking explosions, that were obviously from inside before it even hit. All this, and the explosions were real, but I mean they were being blamed on an airplane that never hit the Pentagon. And then the story about the airplane is all full of gematria and is a complete total lie, a complete fabrication. It's very obvious that it was hit by a missile, and they hit the very same room where the civil rights case was going on for Hugh Squires, the same guy of Squire guitars. If you've ever seen a Squire guitar, and you have, if you don't, go to any musical store and you'll see a Squire guitar. That's the Hugh I'm talking about. That's the guy who calls me and explains this stuff to me. Okay, now. While his case was blown up in the Pentagon, the receipts for Bottom Line and his international publishing license, all this stuff that related to that was buried in the Twin Towers, because international business with all the countries from his ASCAP license had to go through the World Trade. That's why it's called the World Trade Centers, because it was world trade. So they buried what they did to Hugh and took everything from him. Okay, he's not wealthy now. Okay, and I shouldn't laugh. I mean, it's sad. Okay, they took everything from him and erased what they did, made a war in the Middle East based on what they did to him and what they took from him. And even George Bush came out and said, he said Hugh's structures are coming down, and he meant to say huge structures because he was so conflicted in his head about what he had done. And even George Bush started to act a little odd after he knew that he was responsible for the carpet bombing of millions of innocent people in the Middle East. Okay, but this is the kind of truth that needs to get out. This is the kind of truth that you need to spread far and wide. Don't let me just be this one single target. Okay, for the CIA. Spread it fast. Spread it like wildfire. Make it a go critical mass. Okay. Because in critical mass is like when you have two pieces of what happens in a nuclear missile is you have, I think it's 39 pounds or maybe it's kilograms, I can't remember, of fissionable material, and then they put one little pie wedge piece over on the other side. And when it's time to make the missile explode and have a nuclear reaction, they fire that last wedge into it, and then it has all the mass that it can stand, and it has to explode. Okay, and I know it's more complicated than that, but they got to fire neutrons into it and all that. But basically, once it gets so big, it has to explode. And this is what has to happen with Hugh's story. And you that are listening to me have to get this information out to people. You have to take responsibility for what's going on in your country if you ever want to see a change. You see, our country killed 2 million innocent people that had nothing to do with 9/11 over in Iraq. And that should bother you enough to want to go out and tell this truth to a million other people. You know, the rest of the world already knows it. The premier of Saudi Arabia offered Hugh a television station and said, you can come to my country. We'll set you up with a place to live. You can talk about your story all you want in my country. Okay, I mean, that's how serious this is and how well the rest of the world knows this. And this is why the CIA watches every freaking thing he says, and they'll probably get a hold of this video too. So that's why you need to take it and you need to spread it like wildfire. Okay, you need to learn the names, learn from him. Let him tell you the other names that I'm not willing to mention to you. Okay, that are dangerous and things like that. And you know, go out and learn this information and learn who the frickin' pedophiles are. Do you care? Do you want to know if somebody started in your church started a church in this area, if they might be related to a pedophile group? You know, I'd like to know. I'd like to be able to put 2 and 2 together. I'd like to see what's going on in around me and keep people safe. Okay, and I know you want that too. So oh, you met Ozzy Osbourne, Earl? Yeah, I had a window open over top of your comments, but I just saw that. But yeah, Ozzy Osbourne is related to all the other Osbournes. It has to do with the Wizard of Oz, the movie, not the book. Okay, the book was written about people somebody did correct me on that. Yeah, the original book was about the same bankers, okay, that are related to this story as well. And about how they had replaced currency with real money with fiat money and that sort of thing. And good story behind that. But the movie intentionally replaced the information from the Wizard of Oz that was intended to fight the bankers and the fiat currency that we have. Okay. And think about that. It's the same people that made that movie that are in with the pedophile groups and a whole lot of governors in this nation. And a whole lot of them are in Catholic and Baptist and Methodist churches throughout this country. Okay, they start these churches and they prey on little kids. Well, they're the same ones from the Queen who run the banking industry as well, who didn't want the Wizard of Oz to tell the truth of what it really meant anyway, so they changed it to the ruby slippers and completely obfuscated the actual meaning of the Wizard of Oz book, because they run the banks as well. All that interest from the Federal Reserve goes to that daggone Queen over there, who needs to be overthrown out of our country with the Federal Reserve, and it needs to disappear. Okay, we need to get our country back, and that's why this information needs to go viral. That's why I'm trusting you to not just hear this information, but to share it with as many people as humanly possible. Go through your friend list and share this information. If you don't like the sound of my voice, or you don't think somebody will listen to me, learn it yourself, make your own video, because the truth just needs to get out there. It doesn't have to get out through me. It just needs to get out there. I don't care. I don't make any money off of it. I do this for free because I care about my country. I care about the victims. And I want to see a change. That's why I tell you this information. This is why I harp on the same subjects over and over again. And this is why I'm trusting you to take this information and to give it to as many people as humanly possible. And you'll learn that the same Queen that's running the banks, where all the interest and all of our debt that's created, debt money, and you need to, oh gosh, if you don't know how the banking industry works in this country, I have on my playlist on Bow and Arrow. Okay, you can Google it yourself, or search for it on the search bar on YouTube, or if you can't find it, you can go on one of my playlists called the Money playlist. Okay, and one of them just called Money. Go down to that one and look for Money as Debt. Money as Debt, D-E-B-T, debt. And also look for the other one that talks about the Wizard of Oz, okay? Those two stories will tell you how money actually works. Money is not, there is no such thing as money. Since 1933, money has actually been illegal in this country because we run our country in a state of bankruptcy, as declared by President Roosevelt, okay? President Roosevelt declared our country in a perpetual state of bankruptcy, and money is actually illegal. What you have now is created by the Federal Reserve and is a picture of debt that is created. What happens is a lot of people think that they have, when they go to the bank to get a loan, that bank has money to lend you. And it does not. Your bank doesn't carry any more money than what it absolutely has to have throughout the day-to-day normal transactions and that sort of thing. But they don't have any money for loans. What happens is, based on your decision to pay and work and pay back more than you loan, the bank that you go to, your local bank, writes out a request to the Federal Reserve, and not just in our country, but any of the reserve banks around the world that operate on this debt system. And that money is printed from the Federal Reserve at that moment, so that the money that is created is a picture of the debt that you just wrote your name on that bank. And that money, as it's repaid plus interest, okay, is simply a picture of that debt plus somebody else's debt. So what does that mean? That means the debt, in order for a currency to exist, has to constantly balloon, because you always have to pay back more than you actually created by creating new debt. So that's why we have the petrodollar. Because we have to constantly balloon these debts, so that foreign governments have to constantly buy our bonds. And that's why we have this $22 trillion in debt, because without this constantly ballooning debt, there would be no money. If everybody paid off their debt dollars at the same time, currency itself, as it is existing right now, would cease to exist, and people don't understand that, okay? So don't be surprised when our $22 trillion debt, which seems unfathomable now, just as $4 trillion of debt seemed unfathomable in the 90s when I was a kid. Well, don't think it unfathomable when it has to balloon again to 50, 60, or 80 or $100 trillion, because it has to happen in order for currency to continue to exist. Or we have to do as the Constitution demands, and the Constitution, which is being plainly and obviously ignored right now in our country because of this banking cartel that has taken over and is run by the Queen of England. This banking cartel runs this system of debt dollars. This could be overthrown, and we could do what our Constitution says, and the government itself create money debt free. And then the debt would, or the dollars, the real currency would be in your community and not constantly being sucked out of the community, making people homeless, and funneling all wealth in the entire world towards just a very elitist few who ultimately own everything. Homelessness, as is explained in those videos, is a direct result, by and large, of the bankers that are run by the Queen, that are putting pedophiliacs all over your country to infiltrate and dumb down your people and to demoralize them so that they can't understand what's going on, so that they never have a desire to overthrow what's going on. And it's not just Republicans. Yes, your president understands exactly what's going on fully, but so do all the Democrats as well. Okay, this is not just a Republican thing. No, it's both sides, okay? The reason that you have Fox News, and remember, the same Hugh Squire of Squire's Guitars owned Fox News, same guy that I got all this information from, who calls me and tells me this, the one whose receipts were buried on 9/11, the same one who's abducted by the Wicked Witch of the West, when he was a little boy. Okay, that same Hugh Squires, okay, he's... gosh, sometimes I forget where I'm going with all this. Dang it, I lost my train of thought. I hate it when I do that. Yeah, well, okay. It's his truth, okay, that when they come out on Fox News and they're just offering you a Republican perspective, and then CBS and the other ones just give you a Democrat perspective, all they're doing is just getting you to look to look at the disinformation about the reality of what's going on in your country. As long as you stay caught up in those stupid little issues that are on Fox News that was owned by Hugh Squires before Rupert Murdoch owned it, okay, that and that's why all this happened, okay? Think about how much all these contracts are worth, hundreds of billions of dollars that were stolen, on 9/11. It had nothing to do with terrorists, okay? That was a complete and total lie. It's not surprising that the George Bushes were friends with the bin Ladens, that they were doing business together, and they obviously concocted this scheme, okay? And it was concocted way before George Bush, okay? It was concocted sometime probably back in the 60s when they were originally beginning to steal the businesses from Hugh, okay? Think about that. The Pentagon was founded on the day the ground was broken at the Pentagon for its construction in 1968 on 9/11. That's not a coincidence. Okay, they were planning this for a long time, and Bin Laden was George Bush's friend and buddy. Okay, and that's why you never saw the body. Okay, you have to take their word for it. Wink, wink. That the Navy threw his body in the ocean. Wink, wink. And the people that SEAL Team 6, were all dead the next day when a shot out of the sky because they supposedly killed bin Laden. And now you have this guy on Fox News, wink, wink, who goes around saying, "Oh yeah, I was there. I killed bin Laden myself." Wink, wink. And the SEAL Team 6 is all dead, so they can't testify. It kind of sounds like what happened to John F. Kennedy, doesn't it? Oh, and it's the same group of people, isn't it? It's the same people. Do you see how it works now? Do you understand how it's the same bunch of frickin' pedophiles that staged 9/11? Do you get it yet? Do you understand what's going on? Better yet, if you get it, do you even care enough to learn this truth? Well, okay, if it's not over your head, well, keep learning. For heaven's sakes, nobody learns everything the first time they hear it. Gosh, it's all connected. Okay. Had nothing to do with frickin' terrorists. Okay, not some guy in a cave on the other side of the world. He was a friend of George Bush, did a lot of business, was down there with George Bush all the frickin' time. They obviously concocted that story. It was all bullcrap, okay? Every last bit of it. And we sent our soldiers over there and killed millions of innocent people that had nothing to do with had nothing whatsoever to do with 9/11. While at the same time, they framed Hughes' relatives for having trained the terrorists that flew the airplanes into the World Trade Center. Think about that. What are the chances? Yeah, the people that ran that those schools, training schools, flight training schools, these were all relatives of Hughes. Imagine that. And so George Bush concocts this plan to go after Saddam Hussein, which is not a coincidence because the HU was referring to Hugh Squires, okay, of Squire Guitars, the same Hugh Squires, okay. That was the story that they came up with. Let's go get Saddam Hussein, and Bin Laden's going to stage as the terrorist so that we can go out and create a war machine and kill in. And by the way, most of the victims in Iraq were, guess what, Christians, because they set up ISIS to go attack Israel's enemies. And don't you ever forget that Israel is an enemy of the world. It is not the people that they say it is, okay? And I don't mean every single person there. I'm talking about their government. I'm talking about how they're fake Jews. They're not real Jews. They're fake. They're what Jesus said, beware of the synagogue of Satan, people who say they are Jews but are not Jews, but are of the synagogue of Satan, Revelation 3:8. It's time we heed Jesus's warning and we actually take Jesus seriously. This same Zionist group are the same people connected to the Queen, connected to the pedophiles. They're the same people. That's why all throughout the Middle Ages you see these stories of the Jews involved with pedophilia, because they're actually true, okay? Because they're not Jews, okay? They're not the Jews that existed in the time of Jesus. They're white. Figure that out. Netanyahu, named after Hugh Squires, is not his real name, okay? He invented that name. He took that name because it was part of the 9/11 conspiracy, if you will. It was part of what happened when they destroyed the receipts of Bottom Line and buried Hugh and stole all those hundreds of billions of dollars. Okay, that's what happened to your country. Israel is a farce, okay? And no, don't be mad at any individual just living his life in Israel. No, be mad at the Zionist movement and the false Jews who claim they're Jews but are not, but are of the synagogue of Satan, just like Jesus said. Okay, it's time we take Jesus seriously. Jesus didn't say that for no reason. If we claim we believe the Bible, how about if we believe what Jesus plainly said? Okay. Jesus said, beware of the Jews who are not Jews, but are of the synagogue of Satan. Revelations 3:8. I think it's 3:8. Pretty sure it is. But just Google synagogue of Satan real quick. You'll find it. But that sounds right. I think it's 3:8. So these are the same people benefiting. Okay, all around the world benefiting from the theft of what happened on 9/11. They blame terrorists. They created an army. That army is aiding fighting the enemies of Israel and killing millions of Christians. Christians got decimated in Iraq by ISIS that was created by your CIA, by your government, as part of the cover-up for what they did on 9/11. And it all works together. They get to help Israel defeat their enemies. They get to go after Syria. Because Israel ultimately wants to take over Syria. That's well established, well understood. The Queen is very desperate to start a war with Iran. All this is well known and understood by anybody that pays any attention whatsoever. Okay, and they all are part of the same group, the same system, benefiting from the theft of 9/11 and what happened. So is my story of Hyles Anderson College related? Of course it is. One way or another, these people that are pedophiles and morally delinquent in so many ways, that have so many connections to Detroit, then yeah, I say very strong evidence that it probably is. Yes, it's circumstantial. Don't harass anybody. Don't call anybody. Don't irritate people. Everybody should be innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. This is still America, and even if they are guilty, they have their day in court regardless, and should be presumed innocent until proven guilty. But I am putting forth circumstantial evidence that should be investigated further. And learn those names. Learn the names of the people who are the pedophiles. I'm giving you real information here, okay? We can do numbers all day and all night long, but all the numbers in the world don't prove that anybody did it, okay? They just prove somebody did it, but who and why and what their names are and where they're located and how they connect to each other will always be just a silhouette. The best you can see with numbers alone is a silhouette of what happened. You'll never see the actual substance. I'm giving you the substance here, okay? This is the meat and potatoes, okay? This is the real deal. What I'm telling you here is the history of your country and reality. Don't just stick with just the numbers, okay? Go deeper, go further, learn the actual connections, learn the reality of what's going on in your world, and let's change it. Let's in a legal, responsible manner, revolt in a real way. No, I'm not talking about millions of people getting killed. I'm not talking about that. Let's revolt as decent citizens, presume our constitutional rights. Let's learn our constitutional rights. And if you're in England, well, heck, you don't have any rights. You're still a subject. So, go overthrow the daggone queen like you should have done 200 years ago, okay? I don't know what to say about that. I don't know how you do it in Europe. All those queens and monarchies if they'd have been overthrown 200 years ago like they were here, maybe we wouldn't have these problems today. If you don't think the queen is still powerful, and if you buy the bull crap that she's just a figurehead and all that baloney, you really don't understand what's going on. I'm giving you the truth. Take that truth. Learn that truth. Go to Hugh Squire's Facebook site and page and befriend him, and be sincere and honest and eager to learn with a good attitude and learn the truth of what happened on 9/11. He's in the middle of it. For heaven's sakes, the priest that he confessed to framed Oswald in the Warren Commission. Okay, you don't think that's connected? Yeah, he's telling you the truth. Okay, and even if you don't understand everything that he says, or you don't see how he can have as many connections as he does, don't worry about it. Just concentrate on the ones you do understand and that you can see. Surely you understand what I just said there, okay? Understand that. Build from that and understand the reasonable things, okay? That you can plainly see and understand by just learning the what happened to your country. So that's the truth. So don't ever think that. Don't buy the lie. Don't buy the lie that is perpetuated by the people who benefit from the theft of 9/11 that it had anything to do with terrorists. It didn't. That's the scam. That's the lie. The news is not going to report it on either the Republican side or the Democrat side because they all benefited from the theft that happened on 9/11, from the burying of the receipts, okay? From the hostile takeover of Fox News from Hugh. I think that's how. I think that is directly connected. You may have to ask him. I don't perfectly understand every last single point, and the way every last single thing is connected. I'm still learning this stuff too. But he did own it, and so they're obviously not. They're definitely benefiting from the cover up. Okay, so one way or another, and all of them are. So if Fox News gives one perspective and CBS gives the opposite perspective, understand that both perspectives are at best disinformation. Disinformation is not non-factual information necessarily. Disinformation is, oh, look over here. And some of it's not factual too. Some of it's lies. Some of it's completely invented. We've proven that through Gematria a lot of times, you can tell. And also right here in Ohio, when they took this picture of Edward Snowden, called him a name that I forgot now. I made a video on it. That called him a name that rhymed with Snowden, and literally painted a beard on him with Photoshop and said he was about to shoot up Youngstown, shoot up a synagogue. And it was so freaking apparent that any moron should be able to see it. I made a video on it, but I guarantee you millions of people looked at it and thought, oh, there was almost a shooting in Youngstown, Ohio. And there wasn't. I mean, they were literally just mocking you. And they do this in the news all the time. I showed how in Parkersburg, West Virginia, next here to where I live, they staged a false shooting back in 68 or 69, whatever it was. I forgot now. At a bar, it was a real shooting. They really killed people, but they did it according to the gematria of the bar was the same, the exact same in all four ciphers as the same as as I think it was the bar and the mayor at the time of Parkersburg, and it had perfect overlap. And it's like, that's not a coincidence, and then that the name of the shooter, Grimm, was the name of the movie that was being promoted to bring in this pornographic film that was coming in that year. Because what happens with the publishers is when they get media attention and they bring a name out, that name gets circulated in the news basically for free just by staging a shooting and killing people. And the people really die, okay? So there's a lot of these stage shootings. They're staged, and some of them are fake altogether, but a lot of them are real. But a lot of them are publicity stunts by publishers, and that's something that you need to consider when you see a lot of these shootings going on. Virtually none of the school shootings are organic or done through the means that is given to you through the propaganda CIA-run media, both the Republican or the Democrat side of the media. All of that is disinformation. I would say 95% of school shootings are done as some sort of CIA orchestrated event. That's why you see in Parkland shooting, the girl comes out and says, there were all these shooters in mass shooting, and then you get, one person arrested. It's obviously a lie. Even the Walmart shooting, people saw other shooters. There's a reason this is going on, okay? And you're not hearing that on the news. But somebody will come out and testify on a YouTube video that this is what I saw, okay? But you're not hearing that. The news is promulgating the CIA disinformation. And these shootings are occurring mostly in gun-free zones because they don't want the story of the gun saving the day, so that they can take away more guns, have more control over you. And if you think they're violent now, wait till they take your guns away. You think they're going to shoot fewer people? No, they're going to invade you. Okay, they're going to bring Russia or Iran or somebody over here, proxy for the Queen, and they're going to kill millions of Americans if you let them take your guns, because they're willing to kill thousands now. So you take away your only defense, what are they going to do? Once you understand who these people are and what they're up to, and that they run your government, and they run the CIA, the only logical next step is an invasion, and they're going to kill millions of Americans. Do you understand that? So learn what I'm saying today, get the connections, and share this with millions of people. Not you yourself, but, encourage more people to share this with more and more people and reach critical mass. Some of the things I've said, by the time you try to look them up in a few days, will be gone because the CIA will probably get a hold of this and will probably erase them, but it doesn't matter because we've already clipped all the verification of what I'm saying, okay? And we've copied it and made copies, and we have this information. It's too late. We have it. Okay? So when people see me get a little irritated at church that, I can't hardly go to my Sunday school class because I want to tell this truth, and I don't get the impression that anybody has the ears to hear or the eyes to see what I'm trying to say. You see why? Because it's heavy, deep truth. And we're just so content at churches to placate, in a sense, the pedo gangs by not taking the time to understand the reality of what's going on, and not being the voice of Christ against them. Instead, they end up running the churches by and large. Not my church, but they do go out and they get it and they start these ministries with the full intention of raping and hurting little kids. Okay, a lot of them. And it's going on all around your country. And in the case of the Catholic Church, it's been going on for 1,500 years. How anybody could ever send their poor innocent child to a Catholic church is way beyond me. I can show you information right here in a book I have written by a Catholic priest at the time of Abraham Lincoln, who talks about it going on in the 1860s. Okay. He was Abraham Lincoln's lawyer, or I mean the other way around. Abraham Lincoln was his lawyer. Sorry, I gotta get a cup. Drink of water here. I've been talking over an hour. The Catholic Church has always been corrupt and part of a pedophilia gang. Think about just go back and look up where the word nepotism comes from. It comes from a Catholic priest, okay? Was doing things with a nephew, it comes from the word nephew. And, the Catholic Church has always been a disgusting, sick organization, always. Oh, hey, Mike. Gosh, I've been talking for an hour and 20 minutes, man. You missed some good stuff, but I did 3. Mike was actually on staff at Hyles Anderson College, I think, weren't you, at one time? Did the radio station up there. I just done 3 hours worth, if you count all 3 videos, of exposing what I think Hyles Anderson's all about. Offered as much proof as I can, and I do admit that it's circumstantial evidence. None of it is gematria. Didn't use any numbers. I was just given the evidence that I know to be true as far as where people were and when, and the names that are connected to it, and information I know and experienced as well, having been there and having been signed up by Dave Hyles originally to get my application for Hyles Anderson College. So Hyles Anderson College was not a bunch of good people, in my opinion. There were a few very good, sincere people. Some of the staff, like Mike Azinger there, were great, very sincere, good people. There were a few. I had one professor there that was a great professor who went street preaching. His name was Sprunger. Last name was Sprunger. Best person on earth, in my opinion. Very caring and loving, a good, decent person who really wanted to get the gospel out. But so many of them were just brutal, mean, and just took the doctrines that they had that were so black and white. I remember being hit over the head by somebody that got mad because I fell asleep on the bus one time, while I was sitting there, and guy ended up running the Spanish church at the ministry, and I was always so bitter at him. I mean, he used to lie all the time about how many people he'd bring to church and all this. And I knew he was lying. I knew he was a liar, and I knew he was just a jerk. And the people that I worked with that got jobs with me at the factory that were from Hyles Anderson College that would constantly, just the way they spoke and talked about, their speech was no better than that of anybody in the world. And very embarrassing to have to be around them and feel like I was associated with them in any way. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. There were so many people up there who ended up going into ministry, starting ministries that ended up broken. Thousands and thousands of people have been hurt by the pedophile networks that I opine were part of Hyles Anderson College, started in the Detroit area by the same people that raped Hugh Squire of Squire Guitars, who's the story of 9/11, who's the story of Kennedy. And it's all related, all connected, all goes back to the Queen and the Federal Reserve, to the Zionist movement. It's all connected together. I think that I've given enough information here. I hope that if you just joined me that you'll go back in and watch all 3 of the last 3 videos, give you as much of my experience. And by the way, before I quit, I'm going to give you guys, I'm going to just sit here and stare at the screen for a minute, or something pops in my head, I'll say it. If anybody has a question, I have been talking a long time. I did say I would take questions. So if you have a question, I'm looking at the board now. Make sure you put it on the notes for this video. Here, right here, where I put hi. If you don't see hi right there, you're in the wrong place. So type right there if you have a question, anything you want to ask me about Hyles Anderson College, or about Hugh Squires, or 9/11, whatever you want to say about Florida, about Dave Hyles, anything I know. Go ahead and write out your question now real quick, and I'll answer it. Because here in about 60 seconds here, if I don't see any questions, I'm going to go ahead and end the live video. So go ahead and type your question, or at least write hi real quick so I know you're about to give me a question, and I'll give you more time to type it. Anybody have any questions whatsoever? I've got about 40 more seconds here. I'm going to wait, and then I'm going to end the live stream because I know it might take somebody a little bit of time to type it. So 30 more seconds. Anybody want to ask a question? Covered a lot of ground, a lot of big stuff out there. I would think somebody would have some sort of question about it, but maybe not. I will eventually get this on YouTube on Bow and Arrow. It's the name of my YouTube page. My Facebook page, if you join the group, is called Bow and Arrow Straight Shooting the Truth. Feel free to add truth seekers to the page. Karen, I'm actually getting off here in 10 seconds. I'm actually ending the live stream right now. So if you do go on YouTube, please like, share, and subscribe. Invite friends to the page. If you're an honest, sincere truth seeker and you want to know the truth, please come on. Hi, Terry. I'm getting off right now. I'm sorry. Bad timing, but please go back and watch all 3 of the videos, and you'll understand this whole story the best. And thanks for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe.